Thank you very much and welcome, and especially warm welcome to the four heads of state on the panel with me today. And we'll be hearing from all of them a little bit later. And also a warm welcome to President of Somalia, who's back here in Lancaster House after our successful Somalia conference. And welcome everybody. 8 years ago, when the United Kingdom last held the G8, hundreds of thousands marched to make poverty history. Nelson Mandela stood in Trafalgar Square and he called on humanity to rise up and free millions trapped in the prison of poverty. Unprecedented agreements were reached on aid, and in recent years, a combination of economic growth and smart aid has helped to deliver huge advances in cutting poverty. Aid has been particularly vital in the fight against diseases like malaria and polio. But 8 years later, poverty is still very much present in many of the countries represented here today. And today I want to talk about why and how I believe we can use this G8 and this meeting right here today to forge together a new agenda that will drive growth for us all, and in doing so, finally give us the chance to fulfill the ambition of 2005 to eradicate extreme poverty from our world. Now, let me start with why the problem of poverty has not gone away. Some will say that promises on aid weren't kept, and they would be right. Britain is one of the few countries in the world to have honoured its commitment to spend 0.7% of its gross national income on aid. We're proud of that. And we will keep the pressure on our international counterparts to do the same. Some will say that too much aid has been badly spent. They are right too. All of us need to get better about how we use aid, and we're doing that. That's why Britain is focusing our aid on tangible, measurable outcomes, like vaccinating 50 million children against preventable diseases and securing schooling for 20 million children. But I believe there's an even more fundamental reason why poverty has not yet been beaten, and it's this. We simply can't eradicate poverty by using aid alone. Yes, aid is vital and it's helped to drive extraordinary progress, but aid inevitably focuses more on the consequences of poverty. Yet to eradicate poverty, we need to deal with its causes. That means supporting what I call the golden thread of conditions that enable open economies and open societies to thrive. The absence of conflict and corruption, the presence of the rule of law, of free speech, of property rights, of strong institutions. These things aren't just valuable in themselves, they're also vital in providing the foundation for the sustained economic growth that can lift countries out of poverty. And it's a simple fact that countries beset by corruption and weak governance are most likely to succumb to conflict. And we should remember this: no country in conflict has ever met a single one of the Millennium Development Goals. Now, a big part of tackling the causes of poverty is ensuring that developing countries get the revenues and the benefits of growth that are rightfully theirs. And there are three vital things in making that happen: fairer taxes, greater transparency, and more trade. The 3 T's, as I call them. Now, it's a snappy title, but some people say, why link these 3 things together? Well, I would say this: because they all have something in common. In each case, developing countries are badly missing out. When taxes aren't collected, the poor suffer. In fact, illicit flows out of African countries exceed what they gain in aid. When companies extracting natural resources like minerals and oil are not transparent and don't publish the payments they make, or when governments allow these payments to leach away in corruption, people in developing countries miss out on the vital revenues that they're due. And when trade is choked by barriers and bureaucracy, developing countries miss out again on the chance to grow. These issues aren't just important, they are ever more urgent too. Developing countries are finding new sources of natural wealth, like offshore oil and gas in Ghana or in Tanzania. And the forces of globalization are driving ever greater opportunities for growth and trade. So just think about what missing out on this growing income means for a country where thousands of children are dying every day because of malnutrition, or where sick parents have to choose between buying medicine to save their own lives or paying for food for their hungry children. So fairer taxes, greater transparency, and more trade are three vital and linked weapons in the war against poverty. And the other thing that joins them all together is that they all need political leadership. Too often in the past, this has been missing. Take Equatorial Guinea, Africa's third largest oil producer, where the president has maintained that oil revenues are a state secret. Action by the US Justice Department against the president's son lists assets allegedly acquired with money stolen from the state. These include a Gulfstream jet, 8 Ferraris, 7 Rolls-Royce, a $38 million estate in Malibu, and white gloves previously owned by Michael Jackson. Let me just add, Equatorial Guinea has not received 1 penny in aid from the United Kingdom. Now, per capita, Equatorial Guinea is richer than Poland, but its child death rate is 20 times higher. According to Kofi Annan's Africa Progress Panel, and it's a huge privilege to have you here today, Kofi, 12 of the 25 countries in the world with the highest child mortality rates are resource-rich African countries. Many of these countries should be rich enough not to need our aid and industrious enough to be trading partners, great trading partners, in the years ahead of us. So I want to break something of a taboo today. For too long, the international community has shied away from condemning the appalling degree of corruption and mismanagement of resources and the fundamentally bad governance that is destroying lives in some developing countries. Now, there are always voices saying, why cause the stir? Why be the one to point the finger? Well, Britain has kept our aid promises, so I don't think we should hold back from saying this. Corruption is wrong. It starves the poor. It poisons the system. It saps the faith of people in progress. It wrecks the case for aid. When we see it, we should condemn it utterly. Now, I know some people put their hands up in the air and say, well, this can just never change. But by ending the era of tax secrecy and driving real openness over what governments and businesses do, it can change. And there are political leaders right here today who are making that happen. President Mahama of Ghana, who's opened up his country's budget so his people can see how the money is spent. President Condé of Guinea, who has recently led the way on publishing mining contracts online. President Kikwete of Tanzania, who's working to ensure the citizens of his country can enjoy clear and secure property rights. And President Sall of Senegal, who's simplified taxes, unleashed auditors on public finances, and set up a commission to tackle corruption. So all of these countries are taking action. But frankly, this needs political leadership from the developed world too. We have the tools in our hands to tackle these problems. We can build international tax systems that make it easier for developing countries to collect the taxes they are due. We can ensure that our extractive industries and companies are accountable and transparent in their dealings, and we can do more to help promote African trade. And the extraordinary thing about this tax, transparency and trade agenda is it's not just the right thing for us to do morally, it is also right for our economies too. Because when some businesses don't pay their taxes, it corrodes public trust. When some companies don't play by the rules, that drives more regulation, makes it harder for other businesses to turn an honest profit. And when Africa doesn't trade to its potential, we all lose the chance to benefit from trading with one of the fastest growing continents on the planet. By 2050, the continent of Africa will have nearly twice the population of China, and a third of the world's youth will live there. We would be crazy not to be part of this journey with Africa and African countries. So in short, getting tax transparency and trade right is good for us and vital for developing countries too. So let me tell you briefly what we're going to do. First, fairer taxes. At the G8, I'm going to push for international agreements to fight the scourge of tax evasion and aggressive tax avoidance. That means automatic exchange of information between our tax authorities, so those who want to evade taxes have nowhere to hide. It means getting companies to report tax to tax authorities where they earn their profits and where they pay their tax. It also means transparency about who owns which companies and who benefits from it, so-called beneficial ownership. Why does this matter so much? Because some people use complicated and fake structures to hide their profits and avoid taxes. And also because bribes are often held in opaquely owned companies with bank accounts in secrecy havens. The UK today is leading the way by committing to create a central registry of company ownership. And this morning I've held meetings with our overseas territories and our Crown dependencies. Each and every one of our overseas territories and Crown dependencies has agreed to sign up to the Multilateral Convention on Information Exchange. They've also agreed to exchange information automatically with the United Kingdom and to produce action plans on beneficial ownership. I commend their leadership, and I look to other international partners to work with their own territories to reach similar agreements. Just as in Britain, people get angry when they work hard, they pay their taxes, and then see others not paying their fair share, so we should demand the same justice and fairness for others in developing countries too. That means we need to put the information out there so they can calculate the taxes they are owed. And we need them to help improve their ability to collect taxes. Now that's what the UK has been doing across the world. In Rwanda, tax revenues have increased sixfold over the last decade. In Afghanistan, eightfold since 2004. In Ethiopia, a nearly 50% increase between 2007 and 2011. Those are all huge steps forward for those countries, and I commend them. That is why tax is so important. Now, the next T, which is linked to it, is transparency. We need real transparency in the payments that companies make and the revenues that governments receive. Just think for a moment about the discovery of North Sea oil off the coast of our own country in Britain. It has given us revenues of over £150 billion. It's boosted our balance of payments by about £50 billion a year. It's supported about 500,000 jobs. Now imagine if we had no transparency over the way that oil was extracted. Imagine what it would have been like if we had most of our oil revenues taken from us by corrupt politicians, officials, or companies. Too often, that has been the story for developing countries. But with transparency, we can change that. Now, in the last few years, we have seen huge advances. Oil, gas, and mining companies will now have to publish what they pay in every country and for every project they work on. That is already the law in America, it's becoming the law in Europe, and it will be in Canada too. Governments, in return, are committing to publish what they receive. Many developing countries made this commitment a while ago. Now Britain, France, and America are joining them too. We hope others will follow suit. We need to apply the same principles where land changes hand as well. We need transparency over who is buying up land and for what purpose, so that people get a fair deal when they sell or lease out their land, and the property rights of people and communities are properly respected. Today, the G8 and developing countries have agreed to work together to make the most of these huge advances on both land and extractives. And the UK will continue to drive a transparency revolution in every corner of the world through our leadership of the Open Government Partnership. But to make this work, there's something else we need to do as well. And that is to recognise and to get behind heroic individuals who drive this agenda on the ground, often at great personal risk to themselves. People I met this morning, like John Githongo, who was willing to blow the whistle on fraud and corruption in Kenya at real personal cost. Aruna Roy, who almost single-handedly brought on the right to information revolution in India, helping citizens to secure better services and a say in how they're governed. And that is why we're also welcoming the Transparency Champions Challenge, launched today by the Open Society Foundations to provide practical support to people like John, people like Aruna around the world. So we need fairer taxes and greater transparency to deal with corruption. But third, we also need trade as the engine of growth. That means completing the trade deal between the EU and Canada, launching one between the EU and the USA. But just as important is to make sure that the growth of trade benefits Africa too. So let's back African countries in achieving their goal of doubling intra-African trade by 2022. Let's back Africa in ending the crazy bureaucracy that means a trucker taking goods from Cape Town to Kigali has to carry up to 1,000 documents on every trip. And let's back Africans on infrastructure, where they have a point when they say it was largely designed in another era and primarily focused on getting products out of the continent rather than promoting trade within it. So let's get behind President Kabaruka's work through the African Development Bank to secure the private finance that can deliver the infrastructure that is so badly needed. So that is our agenda today, and for the UK's G8 summit next week. You don't get this chance very often. Once every 8 years you get to chair the G8. and working across government, we decided the right agenda, not just for us, but for the whole world, is an agenda of tax, transparency, and trade. It is about proper companies, proper taxes, and proper global rules, ensuring that openness delivers the benefits that it should for rich and poor countries alike. Aid is important, but these things matter just as much. Now is the time. This is the agenda. The world should get behind it. Thank you.